This is Anastasia Gishman, a flash of vibrant energy, captured in digital amber, a Russian gamer, a model, a tattoo artist. Her online presence, a shimmering testament to a life lived loud and in full color. Yet peel back the curated layers, and a different truth began to bleed through the screen. And this is Anna Leikovic. Her Instagram, a carefully constructed monument to success and style. Every post, a perfectly polished vignette of a life envied, a life lived. But what the world saw was a ghost, a mirage shimmering in the digital ether, meticulously fashioned from smoke and mirrors. A carefully orchestrated illusion. These two women, their stories interwoven by the cruel threads of online perception, will reveal a stark reality. The lives behind the influencer facade are not always glamorous. Often, they are grotesque. Welcome.
Welcome back to Heartland Stories. Today we plunge into two chilling tales where the polished veneer of online personas crumbled, revealing horrors that defy belief.
One story tells of a woman who vanished into thin air, her social media feed eerily continuing to post a macabre echo in the void.
The other of a daughter whose actions would shatter the world's understanding of what she was truly capable of.
Hindsight, after sifting through the wreckage of both lives, it's clear both began online but ended in an unimaginable cascade of bloodshed. Before we delve into these harrowing accounts, if you find yourself drawn to the shadowed corners of true crime, to the strange and the chilling, please consider subscribing.
I release new stories twice a week. For those here for a specific narrative, timestamps will appear on screen. Now, with that said, please pour yourself a coffee, settle in, and brace yourself.
This is the case of Anna Leikovic. Our first descent into darkness begins in Eastern Europe, a land steeped in ancient histories, sculpted by the ebb and flow of empires, and vibrant with a tapestry of cultures. Our journey starts in Moldova. A nation of just 2.5 million souls, Moldova might at first seem an unassuming speck on the map. Yet, beneath its quiet surface pulses a fierce national pride. For generations, this resilient land has grappled with economic and political tempests, yet its culture thrives. A unique symphony of Romanian heritage intertwined with Latin and Slavic traditions. Moldova, however, faces a quiet exodus. More than 2/4 of its population now live and work beyond its borders, their global footprint stretching far and wide, especially within the boundless realm of the digital world. And speaking of the digital world, who among us doesn't recall that iconic earworm from the early 2000s? Ozone's Dragosta Dinte, forever etched into our collective memory as Numa Numa, stands as one of Moldova's most enduring gifts to global pop culture, boasting over 700 million views and still counting. And then, of course, there's Moldova's unforgettable Eurovision moment, Runaway, though perhaps better known as the indelible epic sax guy. The online world, what a strange and mesmerizing beast it is. It's a realm without borders, constantly evolving and utterly inescapable. One moment, it's a brilliant beacon of humor and connection. The next, a treacherous labyrinth of deception and danger. Beyond the incessant noise of trolls and negativity lurk stalkers and scammers, their digital fingers sifting through our personal lives as if our private information were a public library. It's a chilling thought how easily one's entire life can be laid bare with a simple Google search. Have you ever wondered how those relentless scammers acquire your number, or why your inbox overflows with an endless tide of infuriating emails? The answer, more often than not, lies in the internet's insatiable greed. Data brokers, these silent architects of our digital vulnerability, amass and sell your personal information to marketers and fraudsters without a whisper of your consent, all in the merciless pursuit of profit. Billions of dollars flow into their coffers as they trade in the most intimate details of our lives. Technically, they are obligated to remove your data upon request, but finding them is often like searching for a ghost, and the process is deliberately, painstakingly arduous. I myself have experienced this unsettling reality. A quick Google search of my own name yields a flurry of results. But what truly chills me to the bone is typing my personal email address into the search bar. Countless websites emerge, openly listing my name, email, and various other private details, all packaged and ready for purchase. It's a profound violation, an unsettling sense of exposure that leaves one feeling deeply unsafe. Now, let's return to the chilling core of our narrative. As you can likely discern, not every digital ripple is as harmless as a viral dancing video. Both of these stories serve as stark, harrowing reminders.
Case 1. The Unraveling Illusion. It was December of 2020 in the Moldovan city of Comrath when a phone call ripped through the quiet night. A call so harrowing, so utterly desperate, it would lead police to a crime scene of such unimaginable gruesomeness and profound disturbance that it would test even the most hardened of officers. And its horror would stand in stark, grotesque contrast to the carefully curated image of the woman at its very center. The call came from a young man, his voice ragged with absolute panic. He stammered, explained that his girlfriend had uttered something so disturbing, so utterly outrageous, that his initial thought was that she was merely joking. But the more he replayed her words, the more they gnawed at the edges of his conscience, an insidious worm tunneling through his resolve. Plagued by a burgeoning dread, he decided to make the journey to her house, leaving her asleep in his own bed. And what he discovered there confirmed his darkest fears. He immediately dialed the police. When officers arrived, nothing could have prepared them for the scene that lay beyond the threshold. Inside the apartment, a tableau of horror unfolded, a sight so gruesome, so deeply unsettling, that several officers would later testify it was the most horrifying crime scene they had ever witnessed. In the middle of a room, slick with blood, lay the body of a woman. She had been dead for hours, well beyond any hope of medical intervention. Her torso had been brutally split wide open by a deep vertical wound, tearing from the center of her chest down to her groin. And in a detail that defied all comprehension, her organs had been scattered around her body. Investigators would later struggle for words, describing the scene as a manifestation of brutality ripped straight from a horror film.
It didn't take long to identify the victim as 40-year-old Praskovia Leikovic, the homeowner. Praskovia lived there with her 21-year-old daughter, Anna, the very same Anna who was the girlfriend of the panicked young man who had called the police mere hours before. And based on her recent chilling confession, the officers' immediate concern shifted from her safety to their own. But before we plunge into the depths of that confession, who precisely were Anna and Praskovia Leikovic? Praskovia, the mother, was a beacon of devotion and love. She had given birth to Anna at just 19 years old. While Anna's father, Vasily Alidov, was technically present in her life, his presence was largely a phantom. Vasily, a wealthy landowner and farm owner, was consumed by his own grand ambitions, even running for governor of a local region in 2019, though without success. Despite his political shortcomings, his diverse business empire flourished, providing a comfortable financial cushion for the family. Money, while never a substitute for love or genuine emotional connection, afforded Praskovia one crucial advantage: the ability to raise her daughter in relative stability, even as a single parent. As a result, Anna attended good schools, excelled academically throughout her education, and eventually enrolled in university to study medicine. While Anna's specific field of specialization remains unclear, one chilling fact would soon emerge. Anna possessed a profoundly unsettling understanding of human anatomy. Not the kind of knowledge that eases a sore back, but the kind that could, without a flicker of hesitation, describe the precise method of removing a human heart. Anna and her mother remained close throughout Anna's formative years. However, as Anna transitioned into her teenage years, disturbing changes began to take root. Praskovia started to notice troubling patterns in her daughter's behavior. Anna became increasingly fixated on fashion and the opulent trappings of wealth, a common enough fascination for a young girl. But with a father who expressed his love primarily through financial extravagance, Anna quickly spiraled into a world of unchecked indulgence, becoming deeply, irrevocably spoiled. Nowhere was this more glaringly evident than on her social media. Her feeds became a canvas for designer clothes, lavish vacations, and a meticulously crafted, flawless appearance, undoubtedly enhanced by a myriad of filters. Over the years, her obsession with her Instagram persona intensified. At the time, she had amassed over 6,000 followers, not a monumental number perhaps, but enough to fuel her belief that she was gaining significant traction. Her Instagram feed was a relentless cascade of luxury: Gucci and Prada ensembles, poolside cocktails, and dozens of dazzling European beaches. It was a curated highlight reel of beauty, wealth, and status, and Anna posted with a fervent regularity, showing the world only what she wanted them to see, a seemingly perfect life. Beneath this glittering facade, Anna harbored a fervent dream of becoming an influencer, a globetrotter, a brand collaborator, perhaps even mingling with the elite. A life built not on the painstaking effort of academics or hard work, but on the fleeting power of image. Tragically, as she grew older, her social media obsession tightened its grip, and her university studies began to unravel. After all, when life has handed you nearly everything you've ever desired, the true value of earning it can easily be forgotten. But academics were not the only casualties of Anna's increasingly fractured reality. Behind the filters and meticulously edited snapshots, her party-fueled lifestyle had slowly, inexorably, given way to the insidious embrace of alcohol and drugs. What began as the occasional Friday night drink had by then morphed into a daily, relentless binge. While all of this was unfolding, her mother, Praskovia, watched in silent horror. She saw Anna, her daughter, slip deeper and deeper into the suffocating grip of addiction. Despite every desperate plea, every attempted intervention, nothing seemed to pierce the fog that enveloped Anna. In fact, a mere month before the ultimate tragedy, Anna suffered a severe overdose. After that terrifying incident, both her mother and grandmother, their hearts heavy with dread, redoubled their efforts to help her. But Anna, trapped in her own darkness, remained utterly uninterested in change. Whenever the topic arose, she would erupt in furious defiance, often vanishing for days, leaving behind only worry and despair. And then came December of 2020. What had once been the sacred bond between mother and daughter, a relationship of love and devotion, suddenly snapped, twisting into a brutal, chaotic scene beyond comprehension. It was no surprise, then, that after discovering Praskovia's mutilated body and hearing the horrifying confession, detectives swiftly identified Anna as their prime suspect. The investigation began, as is custom, with attempts to reach out to friends and family. Yet strangely, no one seemed to know where Anna had gone. Her social media, usually a vibrant tableau of her life, fell ominously silent, only intensifying the suspicion. It appeared as though she was actively trying to disappear. But Anna, with her limited connections, truly had few places to run. Nevertheless, as hours bled into days, officers began to fear she might have truly slipped through their grasp. Search teams scoured every corner, day and night, but Anna seemed as elusive as she was dangerous. That was until 3 days later when Anna was finally located, calmly residing at a friend's apartment all along. And here's the unsettling detail. Throughout those 3 days, she displayed not a hint of stress. Her friend described her as completely calm, even cheerful. Apprehended at last, she was arrested on suspicion of murdering her own mother. From this point forward, her behavior would only descend further into the chillingly bizarre. From the very first moment, Anna held nothing back. She openly confessed to the murder, her voice devoid of hesitation, shame, or remorse. She recounted the horrific sequence of events in a calm, almost detached manner, as if she were simply describing a mundane trip to the shops, not the cold-blooded slaying of her own mother. According to Anna, the nightmare began just a few days prior, while her mother was away on a work trip in Germany. With the house to herself, Anna had been free to indulge in her usual destructive habits, not late-night snacks and movies, but drugs and alcohol, consumed without fear of judgment or discovery. When Praskovia returned home on the night of December 11th, she immediately sensed an unsettling shift in the air. She knew her daughter intimately, and she could tell, with heartbreaking certainty, that Anna was utterly consumed by drugs. When Praskovia confronted her, Anna vehemently denied everything. The argument spiraled, growing in intensity and venom. But the catalyst, the spark that ignited such unimaginable horror, was tragically pathetic. All Praskovia did was try to persuade Anna that she desperately needed medical help, that she needed to go to the hospital. And apparently, in Anna's distorted, drug-fueled mind, that was the breaking point. In a sudden, blinding flash of rage, Anna stormed into the kitchen, snatched a knife, and plunged it into her mother's chest. Praskovia collapsed to the floor, bleeding profusely. But Anna, in her cold frenzy, was far from finished. What transpired next can only be described as truly unthinkable. Using the knowledge gleaned from her medical studies, she began to dissect her own mother while Praskovia was still alive. I will spare you the graphic details, but piece by agonizing piece, she carved out her mother's organs. When Anna finally finished, she simply laid the knife aside. She claimed she felt nothing, no fear, no regret, not even a flicker of sadness, just an abyssal void. Then, with chilling nonchalance, she undressed, took a shower, meticulously applied her makeup, and changed into fresh clothes. Anna had plans for that evening. She contacted her boyfriend, left the apartment of unimaginable horror, bought a bottle of champagne, headed to his place, engaged in sex, and then, with an unnerving calm, recounted the events of her evening. At first, her boyfriend wouldn't believe her. Who could? Not only did her tone utterly contradict the monstrous words, but the story itself was so absurd, so utterly depraved, he dismissed it as a sick, twisted joke. However, when he pressed for more details, Anna clamped shut, refusing to say another word. Later that night, once Anna had finally drifted into sleep beside him, he slipped out of bed, his heart pounding, and made his way to Praskovia's apartment. And it was there, in that blood-soaked apartment, that his worst fears were confirmed. It was the moment that changed everything. In a blind panic, he snatched up his phone and called the police. But by the time he and the officers returned to his apartment, Anna had vanished. She was, of course, found 3 days later. After Anna's chilling confession, authorities harbored no doubt as to her culpability. She was their sole suspect. Officers made it unequivocally clear to the media, Anna Leikovic is the main suspect, and there is little to no likelihood of any other suspects. With her confession in hand, events moved with alarming speed. Just 24 hours after her arrest, she appeared in court. This would be the world's first glimpse into the vile, unremorseful core of Anna. Despite the glaring cameras, Anna acted as though the entire ordeal was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. She lounged casually on the courtroom benches, idly picking at her fingernails, and even, at one point, pretended to nap. When the judge entered, Anna did not simply stand. She climbed onto the bench itself, a perverse act of defiance, as if this were merely another classroom prank. As she exited the courtroom, a journalist, aghast, asked, "Did you really kill your mother?" Her response was a chilling smile, followed by a light, airy laugh and a casual goodbye. This erratic behavior, when juxtaposed with the sheer brutality of her crime, immediately raised profound concerns about her mental state. One needn't be a psychologist to conclude that she was profoundly disturbed. Even the seasoned investigators were left baffled. Her family and friends were equally stunned. Her uncle, Vladimir, spoke to the press, his voice laced with sorrow. Praskovia loved her daughter so much. She spent as much time as she possibly could with her. It only took 2 hours for the police to tell me that Anna was the main suspect. I could not even imagine this. Alongside the glaring questions surrounding her mental health, one lingering mystery tormented everyone. What was her motive? This was no stranger, no anonymous victim, but her own mother, the one person who had been there, unwavering from the very beginning. Surely a mere disagreement over drugs couldn't incite such a brutal rage, could it? Some theorized this wasn't a singular cause, but rather a toxic confluence of rapidly deteriorating mental health, severe drug abuse, and deeply entrenched anger issues. Before any trial date could even be considered, Anna was ordered to undergo a full psychiatric evaluation, crucial for determining her fitness to stand trial. The findings were deeply disturbing. While Anna possessed intelligence and outwardly appeared to function within society, her emotional landscape was profoundly fractured. She exhibited a stark lack of empathy, struggling to understand or connect with other human beings. According to the experts, it was unlikely she truly grasped the horrific reality of her actions that fateful night. Psychologists ultimately concluded that Anna was incapable of correctly perceiving the circumstances vital for a criminal case, rendering her unfit to testify. The results of her evaluation arrived mere weeks after the crime, and shockingly, the court seemed content with these findings. This meant Anna would never actually face trial for the murder of her mother. And here's the detail that sent a ripple of disquiet through Moldova. The time frame from confession to psychiatric diagnosis to the final ruling was a mere 17 days. We may never fully comprehend why events unfolded with such alarming swiftness. However, it is worth reiterating that Anna's father is a wealthy and influential figure in Moldova. It inevitably leads one to wonder if, perhaps, a few strings were quietly, deftly pulled in the background. Instead of facing any form of prison time, Anna was deemed not criminally responsible for her actions, and so on December 28, 2021, she was committed to a psychiatric institution. There, at least for now, she began treatment for what was officially described as a severely disturbed mind. Naturally, this case exploded across Moldovan headlines, and in a bizarre twist of fate, Anna's social media accounts, once a curated illusion, would eventually explode in popularity, doubling in size, and peaking at over 15,000 followers, before they were finally, mercifully, taken offline.
Immersive narrator, serious with moderate pacing. And so, in a twisted, macabre way, Anna ultimately achieved what she had always craved: fame. Not the glittering, idealized fame she had chased, but a chilling, enduring infamy. What truly drove Anna to commit such an unspeakable act against her own mother may forever remain shrouded in mystery. With her mind so profoundly fractured, the true motives might be buried so deep within her psyche that she will never be able to articulate them. However, one stark truth remains undeniable. Praskovia absolutely adored her daughter. She was a mother devoted, attentive, and fiercely committed to Anna's well-being, and yet she was ultimately cast in the most horrific role imaginable. Online, Anna meticulously painted a glamorous portrait of success, wealth, and beauty, but beneath that meticulously crafted mask, a monster was slowly taking shape. She wasn't merely curating an image, she was actively concealing a lurking horror in plain sight. But it begs the question, what if the roles were reversed? In hindsight, it's easy to dismiss Anna as materialistic, vain, narcissistic, and utterly devoid of remorse.
However, in our next case, the lines blur, and things are far from simple.
So, on that somber note, please pour yourself another coffee.
Case 2. The Shattered Canvas. Shifting our gaze from the verdant landscapes of Moldova, we now journey northeast to the largest country on Earth, a vast, enigmatic land, rich in ancient culture, complex history, and a haunting, often impenetrable isolation. Of course, I speak of Russia. While the very name conjures images of grand imperial architecture, classical artistry, and sprawling, untamed wilderness, Russia is also known, particularly in recent years, as one of the world's most formidable political powerhouses. Today, our focus narrows to the country's western edge, to the magnificent port city of St. Petersburg. A cultural capital, it nestles near the border of mainland Europe, a major gateway into and out of the colossal nation. Thanks to its global significance and a steady stream of tourism, crime in St. Petersburg is, surprisingly, relatively low, at least on paper. Most reported offenses, it appears, involve corruption or bribery, with violent crime rates far less common than one might expect. Yet, even here, murder still casts its long, dark shadow. And on August 9, 2022, that horror would come knocking once again. Police were first alerted to the unfolding tragedy by an unsettling phone call from a young woman. Her identity remains withheld for privacy, but her voice, etched with distress, fear, and profound worry for her friend's safety, conveyed an undeniable urgency. Something terrible had happened, she insisted. Her friend, Anastasia, was dead, lying within her own apartment. At first, the story sounded too far-fetched, too gruesome to be true. But what compelled her to take it seriously was Anastasia's increasingly strange and unsettling online behavior in the days leading up to this terrifying revelation. Something was profoundly wrong. Too afraid to investigate alone, the caller implored the police to meet her at the apartment and check in. And though the officers were understandably skeptical at first, what they were about to discover on the morning of August 10th would irrevocably alter everything. Upon arrival, officers cautiously breached the apartment door, immediately assailed by that all-too-familiar, stomach-turning smell. The place was a scene of utter disarray, clothes, bags, and personal belongings scattered haphazardly across the floor. They called out Anastasia's name, but only silence answered. At first glance, the entire apartment seemed empty. But the deeper they ventured inside, the stronger that sickening odor became. Following their noses, it eventually led them to the bathroom. And tragically, that is where they found her. Inside the bathtub lay the lifeless body of a young woman submerged in the pool of dried blood. Based on the advanced state of decomposition, it appeared she had been lying there for at least several days. A closer examination revealed she had suffered no less than 22 separate injuries, including 13 brutal stab wounds to her head, neck, torso, and upper limbs. It came as no surprise, then, that officers immediately ruled this a homicide. The savage nature of the attack bore the unmistakable hallmarks of intense emotional rage. After the crime scene was secured and forensics teams began their grim work, the body was formally identified by her distraught friends as 26-year-old Anastasia Grisham. But before we delve into the investigation of her brutal murder, let us first understand who Anastasia truly was. Because, as it turns out, her story is woven with threads of profound hardship, remarkable resilience, and ultimately, heart-wrenching tragedy. Born on February 7, 1996, to her mother, Elena, Anastasia's life began shrouded in difficulty. Her father, a severe alcoholic, abandoned the family just before Anastasia's birth, leaving Elena to navigate single parenthood without a shred of support or financial stability. For the first few years, mother and daughter endured abject poverty, moving constantly, sleeping on couches wherever they could find temporary refuge. Elena scrambled for any work she could find, but this often meant Anastasia was left alone for long, solitary stretches of time. By the time she was old enough to speak, she was also learning the harsh lessons of survival. Anastasia cooked her own meager meals, brushed her teeth without instruction, and navigated a world in ways no child ever should.
When she was just 12 years old, her mother made the agonizing decision to send her to live with her grandparents in the nearby town of Kulpino, about 30 minutes outside St. Petersburg. Though a wrenching separation for Elena, it proved a lifeline for Anastasia. She barely knew her grandparents, but they had checked in sporadically over the years, and Elena saw this as Anastasia's only chance for stability. However, this move created a new, painful kind of distance. Where Elena once saw her daughter every weekend, it gradually shifted to once a month, and then, heartbreakingly, to nothing at all. Elena, still consumed by her own desperate struggle for survival, moved to other cities, took on more jobs, and eventually remarried. That profound sense of abandonment etched deep scars into Anastasia's young soul. As a teenager, she became both quiet and withdrawn, and that emotional pain began to manifest physically. Tragically, she developed an eating disorder. But amidst this darkness, a beacon of hope emerged. Despite her mother stepping away, her grandmother chose to step up. She became the unwavering support Anastasia so desperately needed, offering the one thing she had long been denied: genuine care. Not only did she guide Anastasia through her battle with the eating disorder, but she also nurtured her innate creativity, providing the space for her spirit to blossom. As it turned out, Anastasia was an exceptionally talented artist, filling countless sketchbooks and canvases throughout her teenage years. Recognizing that vibrant creative fire within her granddaughter, her grandmother did everything she could to help that talent flourish. But Anastasia's art didn't remain confined to paper or canvas. No, her favorite medium was, surprisingly, skin. Okay, perhaps that sounds a little creepy when spoken aloud, but of course what I'm referring to are tattoos. At just 15 years old, 3 years before the legal age, she asked her grandmother for her very first tattoo. While most guardians would likely have refused, her grandmother saw something different. A young girl desperately searching for direction, for an outlet. And so she agreed. Together, she accompanied Anastasia to get her first tattoo.
That single moment ignited something profound within Anastasia. From that point onward, tattoos were no longer just a hobby. They became a core part of her identity, a driving force behind the life she would meticulously construct. By her late teens, Anastasia had transformed her passion into a burgeoning career. She secured an apprenticeship at a local tattoo parlor, all while juggling her college studies, where she impressively took courses in both computer programming and car mechanics. She was not only a tattoo artist and a petrol head, but a gamer and an entrepreneur, too. Her abilities truly seemed limitless. This was also when her vibrant interests and personality began to shine through in her appearance. She started to dye her hair in brilliant, unconventional hues, made bold, unapologetic fashion choices, and, naturally, adorned herself with striking piercings and tattoos. At the age of 16, Anastasia also ventured into the online world, joining VK, the popular Russian equivalent of Facebook. Here, she eagerly shared her deepest passions: anime, video games, cutting-edge fashion, artistic makeup, and all things creative. Her posts exuded a unique spark, a magnetic energy that drew others in. Her distinctive style, paired with her open and engaging personality, quickly helped her build a dedicated following. Then, in 2014, at just 18 years old, she finally completed her studies. With an education under her belt and a steadily growing fan base supporting her, she moved back to St. Petersburg, determined to become a full-time professional tattoo artist. And she didn't just talk the talk. Anastasia was her art. Her body was a living canvas, covered in tattoos, most of which she had inked herself. The only area left untouched was her back, for the obvious reason that she couldn't reach it herself, though, honestly, I wouldn't have put it past her. Branding herself as Grisham, she built her name from the ground up. It didn't take long for her reputation to soar. Her social media absolutely exploded. By 2019, at just 23 years old, she commanded a staggering audience of over 290,000 followers on TikTok, a truly immense number at the time, especially in Russia. Anastasia was genuinely on her way to resounding success. She was independent, fiercely creative, and steadily building the life she not only wanted, but unequivocally deserved. So the chilling question remains: how did this vibrant, thriving woman end up lifeless in a bathtub? For those who knew Anastasia well, many sensed that something was deeply amiss in the days leading up to her horrifying discovery. For instance, many of her most recent online posts simply didn't add up. A significant number of the photos used were clearly taken days or even weeks before, and the accompanying captions felt oddly unfamiliar, almost foreign. As for her replies to messages, they were short, distant, and disturbingly robotic. They genuinely felt as though they had been penned by another person altogether, a detail that many of her friends noticed with increasing alarm.
Things took an even sharper, more sinister turn when Anastasia's partner, Dmitry, began to utter deeply unsettling claims. He told people that Anastasia was consumed by an extreme depression, not merely a recent shadow, but a lifelong battle, which sadly wasn't entirely surprising given Anastasia's openness about her struggles. But what came next truly shocked them. According to Dmitry, Anastasia had once asked him if her misery ever became unbearable, that she would want him to end her life. An utterly bizarre, chilling request. At first, her friends dismissed his words, urging him to stop making such grotesque jokes, convinced that no one would ever genuinely say such a thing. Yet Dmitry doubled down, insisting that Anastasia had recently been begging him to do it, claiming she simply couldn't bear the pain any longer. He stated unequivocally that she wanted him to end her suffering, and then, with chilling finality, he claimed
he had done it. That's when her friends fell into a stunned, horrified silence. Dmitri stated he had killed Anastasia at her request days prior. This bizarre, almost casual confession sent enormous alarm bells ringing among her friends. Understandably horrified, they immediately contacted the police. And it was those desperate tips that led officers to the grim discovery in Anastasia's apartment. But who precisely was Dmitri Chernyshov, and how did he go from being a client to a killer? As these photos reveal, Dmitri himself bore a significant amount of ink across his body. It was around September 2021 when he was in the market for a new tattoo. At the time, he was in a long-term relationship with a woman named Margarita. Growing tired of feeling basic, Margarita decided it was time to spice things up with a fresh tattoo as her new chosen topping. She had heard of a talented up-and-coming artist in the St. Petersburg area, Anastasia. After getting her own piece, Margarita, with perhaps a tragic irony, recommended Anastasia to Dmitri. In hindsight, one can only imagine the profound regret she would come to feel. And as I'm sure you can anticipate, the story began to unfold. The very nature of tattooing, especially for a large-scale piece, demands hours of shared space, conversation, and an undeniable bond. With Dmitri's tattoo being a massive back piece, that's precisely what transpired. As Anastasia meticulously worked on his design, the two discovered a surprising number of commonalities. Both adored alternative fashion. Both shared a taste for the same music. Both were ardent fans of anime and video games, and both harbored a deep passion for cars. Perhaps even more crucially, both had lost their mothers at a young age. This shared grief, a powerful form of trauma bonding, coupled with their overlapping interests, forged a deep, rapid connection. And from there, the boundaries began to blur. By the way, back to Margarita for a moment. Can you imagine being marked permanently by someone you grew to despise? It must be a bitter sting. Dmitri Chernyshov was born on February 15, 1998, making him 2 years Anastasia's junior physically, and perhaps even more so mentally. His childhood, initially loving, was tragically cut short when his mother passed away while he was still a child. This loss marked the beginning of profound shifts in his life. His father eventually remarried, but for Dmitri, it only introduced further confusion and emotional distance. He was described as a quiet, introverted kid, largely keeping to himself. As he entered his teenage years, he began to retreat from the real world, immersing himself instead in the digital one. Online, Dmitri found a space to express his thoughts, often through poetry. But his writing carried a far darker edge, frequently centering around themes of death, isolation, and profound pain. Looking back at his adolescence, the signs of a morbid fascination were clear. However, there were other red flags. His social media, disturbingly, was rife with misogyny. He would often post girlfriend requirements, which included strict weight limits and appearance-based criteria. Honestly, one wonders who he thought he was. By the time he reached adulthood, Dmitri had already tangled with the law twice, accumulating 2 criminal charges, theft and evading mandatory military service. In Russia, military service is compulsory for all young men, and dodging it isn't just frowned upon. It's a criminal offense, carrying real-life consequences, including a ban on leaving the country. Of course, he neglected to mention any of this to Anastasia. Instead, he painted a picture of a successful IT professional, claiming to work in programming and web design, which, technically, was true. But it turned out this wasn't his primary source of income. Dmitri had a second, far more controversial profession. I'll give you a moment to guess what it might have been. As it turns out, Dmitri was producing Onlyfans content with his then-girlfriend, Margarita. Oh boy, we're talking about Onlyfans again, aren't we?
In Russia, pornography is quite literally illegal. Not just its production, but even its consumption. Therefore, you can imagine that creating and selling such content is punishable by jail time. This, of course, doesn't deter many. For Dmitry, it simply meant living a dangerous double life. One wrong move, and he could find himself behind bars. But Anastasia, it seemed, didn't mind. Over the course of their tattoo sessions, the two bonded quickly, exchanging numbers, messaging online, and even attending local car meets together. Their connection deepened, and before long, things took a distinctively romantic turn. Unsurprisingly, Margarita was deeply unhappy about this. She began to suspect something was happening, and their relationship swiftly devolved into a toxic mess. While Dmitry seemed largely indifferent to Margarita's distress, Anastasia surprisingly did care. Not long after, things between Dmitry and Margarita officially ended, and Anastasia stepped into her place. The pair made their relationship public, and from that moment on, their lives became increasingly intertwined, for better, or more accurately, for worse. After that, Dmitry quickly assumed the role of Anastasia's manager, handling her burgeoning business empire from behind the scenes. By now, she had amassed almost 300,000 followers across Instagram and TikTok, and maintained a steady stream of clients at the tattoo parlor. Overwhelmed by her growing success, Dmitry took the reins. He scheduled her posts, managed her brand deals, booked her clients, and helped create content. On the surface, things looked good. However, their relationship was accelerating at a dizzying pace. Just 5 months in February 2022, they decided to get married. But soon after tying the knot, a darker shift began. As you may recall, Dmitry enjoyed filming adult content. With Margarita now out of the picture, he needed a new partner. And, surprisingly, Anastasia agreed to step into that role. Despite the illegal implications, she seemed largely unbothered. In fact, she even agreed to appear on national television to discuss this new career path, featuring on a Russian talk show called Beyond the Edge. Think Dr. Phil or Jeremy Kyle, but with even fewer boundaries. She approached this episode as an opportunity, a chance to speak openly about her choices and confront the stigma head-on. However, the producers had other, more insidious plans. From the moment she walked onto the stage, it was chillingly clear she had been set up. The tone was accusatory, every question hostile. Not only that, but the hosts painted her as a tattooed rebel spiraling out of control. To heighten the drama even further, they brought in multiple psychologists to assess her live on air. And then, as if the spectacle needed one final cruel twist, Anastasia's mother had been secretly invited onto the show as well. Suddenly, Anastasia was exposed, not only to the entire country, but to her very own mother in a context that was anything but fair. The producers had distorted her into an entirely different person. Even before she stepped onto the stage, the damage had been done. It turned out the host had preemptively interviewed her mother, and when asked about her daughter's career choices, she was, to leave the saste, profoundly disappointed. And look, I know some might not agree with Anastasia's choices anyway, but it was abundantly clear that the moment she walked onto that stage, she wasn't there to be heard. She was merely there to be judged and ridiculed. Surrounded by loaded questions and open mockery, she quickly became defensive. Who wouldn't? She could quite literally see the trap she had walked into. However, the real blow was still yet to come. Moments later, Margarita, Dmitry's ex-girlfriend, walked out, and let me tell you, she was not a happy pizza. She vehemently claimed that Dmitry had not only used her, but was now doing the exact same thing to Anastasia. To further inflame the situation, she also accused him of pressuring all his partners into sex work for his own selfish gain. And Margarita wasn't finished. She publicly accused him of physical abuse, including hitting and even strangling her during their relationship.
Honestly, the entire episode was a train wreck, and, likely, exactly what the producers had hoped for. Drama, scandal, and raw anger, all at the expense of real people and their reputations. And the worst part of it all was that no one seemed to consider the devastating fallout. Because just 3 months after this sensational episode aired, Anastasia Grisham was dead. Now, much like our previous case, there was only one primary suspect, Dmitry. The authorities began by questioning Anastasia's friends, who claimed that when they confronted Dmitry about what he had done, he had begged them not to go to the police, promising he would sort it out. To be honest, I have no idea how such a flimsy excuse could possibly persuade anyone, but apparently it worked. However, here's the thing. Only a couple of days after making this plea, he quietly renewed the lease on the apartment he shared with Anastasia. So, if his plan truly was to simply disappear, why commit to another year of rent? Oh, and let's not forget, Dmitry couldn't actually leave the country, so any hope of him truly running away was essentially zero. And so, the manhunt for Dmitry finally began. However, it wouldn't take long for officers to find him. The very next day, they located him in a hotel just 30 minutes from the apartment. After being arrested, Dmitry was quick both to defend himself and to cast Anastasia under the bus. He claimed that not only had she grown distant, but she had also become close to someone new, a fellow TikToker named Kirill. While there is no evidence to suggest this was anything more than a friendship, it is true that the two were spending a considerable amount of time together. Anastasia had also confided in Kirill about the strain in her relationship with Dmitry and her secret plans to escape. Drawing from her love of Asian culture, she had quietly begun preparing to move to South Korea, discreetly selling off all her belongings, including her cars, and building a secret bank account, all without Dmitry's knowledge. What Dmitry did notice, however, was her growing infatuation with Kirill, and from what investigators have gathered, that ignited a deep, burning jealousy within him. Basically, he was getting a taste of his own medicine. Regardless, this fool claimed that Anastasia had asked him to end her life, but the evidence did not support this in the slightest. And besides, even if it had been the case, it is still undeniably illegal. I could also recount his convoluted version of what happened that fateful night in detail, but honestly, it's a sloppy, self-serving fabrication. What you do need to know is that during the entire time his girlfriend lay dead in the bathtub, Dmitry continued to manage all of her social media accounts, messaging people to buy himself time. He even pretended to be her, messaging Kirill to say that she was breaking up with him, simply so he could rewrite his own pathetic story. The good news is that it took only 5 months to build a compelling case against Dmitry. In January 2023, he finally went on trial, and without any reasonable defense, he pleaded guilty. And unfortunately, here comes the bad news. How do you think Russia punishes a man who murdered his wife? Well, in Dmitry's case, he received a horrifyingly lenient 8 years behind bars. For context, we've seen countless individuals in other countries go to prison for longer than 8 years simply for selling domestic quantities of cannabis. And here's another example. In Saudi Arabia, a journalist was sentenced to 10 years behind bars and 1,000 lashes merely for debating Islamic religion on an online blog. Yet, apparently, in Russia, murder is allegedly far less punishable. The only silver lining here is that he'll be serving his time at IK3, also known as Polar Wolf. And Polar Wolf is notorious for being one of the most brutal gulags in the entire country. Temperatures here can plummet as low as -30 degrees Celsius or -22 degrees Fahrenheit. The prison has no central heating, and to rub salt into the wound, many of the prison cells feature radiators painted on the walls. With unsanitary conditions, frequent beatings, and food more bland than a Zoom meeting about beige paint, this prison is truly brutal. Inmates are forced to walk outside in the sub-zero cold for hours, often in minimal clothing, sometimes even none at all. So, while Dmitry was only sentenced to 8 years behind bars, those 8 years will likely be nothing short of hell. And there is every chance that he won't be the same man who first walked through those gates. Even so, no amount of suffering on Dmitry's part can ever make up for what he did, because nothing will be able to bring Anastasia back to the vibrant life she was only just beginning to build. It's clear that she had been eagerly anticipating a fresh start, far away from Dmitry. She had dreamed of living abroad, even opening her own tattoo parlor in South Korea, because before him, that was what she truly loved to do. She was an artist, and even in her darkest moments, that is what brought her joy. Yes, she was struggling with her mental health, but she was actively working on it, rebuilding herself, and slowly making her way back to, well, just being Anastasia again. But now that journey has been cruelly stolen from her, and she will never get the chance to fully grow into the person she was finally becoming.
And so, on that rather heavy note, I think it's time to bring today's video to a close.
So both of these cases took place in the same corner of the world and featured people living eerily similar lifestyles. The outcomes could not have been any more different. Both of these cases took place in the same corner of the world and featured people living eerily similar lifestyles. Thank you so much for watching today, folks, especially if you made it this far. If you have any thoughts or opinions on these cases, I'd love to know what you think down below. I try to read as many comments as possible. If you have any thoughts or opinions on these cases, I'd love to know what you think down below. We'll be back again soon with another case, but until then, please make sure to look after yourselves and each other. And of course, stay curious. Thank you, one, and goodbye.